I'm not a caregiving expert, and I don't want to be. I don't want to be the poster child for caregivers because I don't have all the answers. Even on the other side of my caregiving journey, I still don't have all the answers to the questions that people ask me. And I'm afraid to be put in this box of this is the go-to guy for everything caregiving related because of the platforms that I have, because of the videos that I make. I don't want to be seen as the go-to guy with all the answers because honestly, I don't have all the answers. During my caregiving journey, there were many new stages of my grandmother's decline that my parents and I had to figure out, okay, what is the new thing that we have to learn to get through this new challenge? And after seeking professional advice from doctors and other healthcare professionals, we would still leave those meetings confused. We would still leave those meetings, even though they gave us the answers to the questions that we were asking, we would still leave lost because we didn't know what we were doing. We were just figuring it out as we went on. And the more that people DM me and the more that people comment on my videos, asking me questions, asking for advice, because I want to come from a place that is helpful and I want to help as many people as I can. Sometimes I don't have all the answers. Sometimes I don't know what to say. I wish I had all the right things to say to you guys, but really the best thing that I can do is just talk about my experience and pray and hope that it helps somebody out there and maybe that leads you to the answer that you're looking for. I wanted to start this episode off by saying that because we've been going heavy with the caregiving content and I'm just afraid of being, and again, this is not me saying that I am the expert or that people call me the expert, but sometimes I feel like I need to be the expert when people ask me questions in regards to caregiving. So the realization I recently had was I don't have to be the expert. I just have to share my experience and hope that it helps somebody. So that's where I'm coming from with this episode. I do want to talk about some of the more recent questions that I've been getting in the comments and the DMs. And also I saw a comment recently from someone that said that they're frustrated whenever they see me talking about the negative comments when there's hundreds of people showing love in the comment section, and I'm almost doing them a disservice by only mentioning the negative, and I realize that. And I do want to acknowledge all of the positive comments and the positive interactions that I get from these videos and from in real life conversations that I have with people. I do want to say that the positive 100% outweighs the negative in the grand scheme of things. When I look back and see both sides, all the people that are negative and all the people that are positive, the positive heavily outweighs the negative. But unfortunately, sometimes as humans, we only focus on the negative things that happen in our life. We often focus on what we lack versus the blessings that are already in our life. And even though I try to tell people like you need to look for the blessings in your life. There's millions of blessings in your life right now and you're missing out on them because you're focused on what you lack. Even though I tell people that, I don't follow my own advice often. And that comment was a wake up call, I guess, and was a reminder to me that although there are people that have negative things to say about me online, there are thousands of people who support me, who are encouraging me to keep going, who are telling me that by sharing my experience, it's helping them. And I need to focus more on those people. And this is not me saying that I'm against criticism. I love constructive criticism. Well, I love is the wrong way to describe it. I understand how impactful constructive criticism can be in one's life, and I welcome it with open arms. If you want to leave constructive criticism in the comments or just tell me personally, of course, maybe it'll sting. But I know when I zoom out, I know that constructive criticism can only make me a better person. And if this person is coming from a good place and they only want to help, then I should probably take into consideration what they're saying. That's all I wanted to say about that. So again, there are many questions and topics that people wanted me to hit, and I'm going to try my best to talk about the top questions and topics in this episode. Number one being, when did I feel this isolation in caregiving? And I was reflecting on this question, and I think throughout the 8 years, there were constant reminders of isolation. It wasn't like in the very beginning of my caregiving journey that I immediately felt isolation and I held on to that feeling. There were moments that reminded me of how isolating this experience can be. And I think the biggest constant reminder for me was that I was quote unquote tied down to this strict schedule and life, because I constantly had to be around. I had to be around for my grandmother for most of the day, and I couldn't travel the way that I wanted to. Did I travel during my 8 years of being a caregiver? Yes. But I didn't get to travel and be out in the world the way that I wanted to, because I was tied down, quote unquote, to a strict schedule. And that was a difficult thing for me to accept. Because before I became a caregiver, I was in college and I was so used to just being out, not worrying about what's going on at home, only worrying about myself, not having to constantly worry about my grandmother's well-being or if she's okay or did she fall or is she calling my name. I didn't think about any of those things. Now that I say this out loud, I was living, I guess, a selfish life, because I was only thinking about myself and my concerns. What am I doing with my life? How is this going to affect my life? And when that's stripped away from you, as a young 20-year-old, when that's stripped away from you, and now I'm here at home having to spend my time with my grandmother, having to tend to whatever she needs, having to help her do all the things that she needs, I start to think about what I don't get to do. What is it that I don't get to do in this life? And I start to think about all those things versus thinking about all of the blessings and all of the things that I actually get to do in my life because of this new responsibility, this new role that has been given to me. So I think that constant reminder of, you need to be here, you need to be here, you need to stay at home, you need to tend to your grandmother. Your grandmother is the person that you need to prioritize in your life. Like, that constant reminder is the thing that added to me feeling isolated. That, in addition to thinking about my peers, thinking about the rest of my family who isn't in this role, who isn't having to constantly think about those things. When I think about family members and my peers not having to have this constant worry, I start to compare myself and think about, how come they don't have this responsibility? Why am I taking on this responsibility for grandma? Grandma has all these grandchildren. How come I'm the only one that stepped up to do this? Why isn't anybody coming here to help me? And that adds to the isolation. That adds to the feeling of, I guess isolation is the best word to describe that. And I do want to recognize that there are caregivers out there right now who don't have any help, who have to take care of their loved one or their patients 24/7, that they didn't have an out on the weekend. They didn't have people coming to the house to help them. I was extremely blessed in my situation. My family was extremely blessed in our situation to have help. Even though it wasn't the amount of help that we would have preferred, we still had help. My mom, because I lived with my parents, I live with my parents during that time and now, but during that time, my mom was around in the mornings. My mom was around in the evenings to help out, to offer support, to offer encouragement. And I honestly don't know how I could have done it without her being there. Like, we were such a team during this time. And I recognize that people they don't have that they might be the only person that is caring for that person. And despite understanding and acknowledging that, the fact that I have all this help and I have all the support, I still felt isolation. I still felt like, why is it just me? Why am I the only person doing this? All this stuff that I was feeling. And I'm still trying to make sense of that now. I'm still trying to understand, why is it that you can understand all of the support and help that you have in your life and still focus on what it is that you don't have. And I think about this weird catch-22 that I played with myself. I guess, I don't know if it's a game that you can play with yourself or if it's just a perpetual mindset that you're stuck in. But I would have this mindset of, I knew that my grandmother only wanted me around during the last days of her life, during the last years of her life. I was the person that made her feel the most comfortable. I was the person I was the only name that she ever called during the last years of her life. I knew that I could provide a level of comfort to my grandmother that nobody else could provide. I don't want to say this isn't a competition like, oh yeah, I loved my grandmother more than the rest of her grandchildren. No, I'm not trying to come off like that, but I knew, for some reason, I just knew that I was the only person that could offer top tier love and support from my grandmother. And even though I knew that, I still felt like, why isn't anybody else stepping up to the plate? Why isn't anybody else doing what I'm doing? Like, that, it doesn't really make sense to know that you're the best person for this job, quote unquote, and then to point the finger and be like, well, how come nobody else is doing this? It's because this is me on the other side looking back at my younger self like, well, of course, bro, of course nobody is stepping up to do what you're doing, because you were built for this responsibility. You are the only person that can do this. You are the only one that grandma looks for. And she's not looking for all these other people. So why are you pointing the finger saying, how come all these people aren't doing this and I'm the only one that's doing this? I was just in this constant battle with myself, and I was wrongfully having resentment for other family members. I was wrongfully angry with other family members for not stepping up and doing what it is that I would do. And even so, I don't know if I've ever explained this, but during my grandmother's last 8 years, we had this schedule that my mom and I would take care of grandma Monday through Friday evening. On Friday evenings, grandma would go to a different child's house, because all of her children live here most of her children live in Las Vegas, and she would go to a different person's house every Friday evening. And then we would pick her up on Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon. And when we would drop her off and I would see other people, like her kids or maybe my cousins, would be helping her out, there was part of me that was like, they can't do it the way that I'm doing it, so I'll just go ahead and do it. And it's crazy to think about the fact that I was thinking, I'm the only person that can do this. And then another part of me is like, how come nobody's helping? So then when I see somebody helping and doing the thing that I'm requesting internally, I'm not saying this out loud, internally, I'm requesting like, man, I want people to help. I want support from other family members. I want people to understand what I'm going through. So I need a little break. And when I would see them helping grandma, to then immediately think they can't do it like I'm doing it. Well, then, like, what is it that you're asking for, bro? Like, do you want help? Or do you just want to complain? Like, what do you need here? And I would be in this constant cycle of that. For the whole 8 years, I felt like that. And it seems so irrational. It seems so, I don't really know the best way. Like, I wish there was a word for it. Irrational, I guess, is the best word to describe it. I was just constantly in the cycle of wanting help and then knowing that nobody could help me in the way that I wanted help. So was I really looking for a solution, or did I just want to complain? And I don't know if other caregivers can feel me on that. Maybe you are the sole caregiver for your family member and you need help. And when people do step up to help, you're like, well, they can't do it like I'm doing it. So it's really like they're not even taking anything off your plate. They're more so like adding to your plate, because you're like, I need help. This person comes to help. And then you're like, they're not helping me in the way that I want them to help me. And now you're just left with more on your plate. It doesn't make sense. I don't know if that's the human condition, or maybe that's just a thing that caregivers go through. I don't know. I haven't really figured that out. It's something that I think this is the first time I've ever really been able to say it publicly. So yeah, it's just a frustrating feeling to ask for all this help and then to get it, and then to then complain that it's not at the level that you would prefer it to be. But I guess the one thing that I can say during this time, so a lot of people ask or leave comments about how can caregivers receive more support from other people, and obviously with the illustration that I'm giving you guys, like it seems like there is no support that people can give you. It's not enough. Like even if people want to give you their time, sure, it'll take a load off of you for a little bit, but for me, I'm still gonna worry about my grandmother. I'm still gonna think that nobody's providing care at the level that we were providing it. But I do think the things that helped me during that time were, more than anything, just encouragement, specifically from my cousins. When my cousins would tell me that I was doing a great job and that nobody else could do the thing that I was doing, that helped me feel encouraged. Maybe that makes me narcissistic. I don't know. Maybe that makes me I don't really know what that, like, how that makes me seem, but that was the truth. Like when my cousins specifically would tell me, dang, Chris, I don't know if I could do what you do, or, yo, I respect you for taking care of grandma in the way that you do. I have respect for you. Like those words of encouragement, those specific words of encouragement helped me so much, even when I was feeling frustrated towards them, or just feeling frustrated for my situation in general. So I guess if you have a caregiver in your life that you know that you want to support, I think just offering some words of encouragement, maybe not specifically saying like, I couldn't do what you do or whatever. I think just offering some words of encouragement, like, hey, caregiving must be tough. I know that I don't do it in the way that you do it, but I see you from the outside looking in, and I see what you're doing, and I respect you. Because that's what helped me a lot. More than people contributing their time, more than people contributing their help, those words of encouragement really helped me a lot during that time. And I think it's because I'm trying to avoid saying the same thing over and over, but I think it's because I knew that I was the only person that could provide the level of care that we were providing for grandma, right? So I knew that. And because I know that this person can't do what I do, just hearing that they have respect for me and that they can see how much effort we put into caring for grandma, that alone is more than enough. Another topic that people wanted me to discuss was the mental exhaustion of caregiving. Caregiving was more mental than it was physical. There were many physical things that I had to do for my grandmother, like getting her out of bed, getting her onto the commode, getting her upstairs to take a shower, then taking a shower, then taking her down. There were many physical aspects of caregiving, and thankfully, those weren't the hardest things during caregiving. The thing that was tough during caregiving was the constant worry of my grandmother's well-being, the constant worry if my grandmother had fallen or not, the constant worry when she was at a different person's house, the constant worry if they're doing everything that we ask them to do. Did she take her medication? Did she potentially choke on her medication? Did she, like, all of these things I was constantly thinking about. And it's so exhausting to be thinking about somebody else's, like, thinking about your own well-being can be exhausting. But then when you add another person's well-being on top of that, and maybe this is how parents feel, maybe this is something that I'm going to experience when I become a parent one day, but the constant stress and the just thinking about somebody else's well-being and if they're okay and if they're safe and if, all of these things, that is the heaviest, I think. There would be often throughout the week, in the middle of the night, I would wake up and my heart would sink because I would instantly think about my grandmother. I would listen to see if she was calling my name. I would think about if she's okay or not. And often I would go downstairs 3-4 o'clock in the morning just to check on her, just to see if she's okay. And if I would go downstairs, and another thing too is when I'm going down the stairs, I'm constantly thinking about, like, is this going to be the time that I walk into my grandmother's room and she's no longer alive? I feel like that's so heavy to carry with you. And it's not, I don't think that's normal, I guess, outside of caregiving. Like in any other context, I don't think that's normal. To think about walking into your loved one's room, walking into your spouse's room, walking into any room and thinking, like, is this person going to be alive? I don't think that's something it's not something I think about anymore. It was something I only thought about during the caregiving. Like, as I'm walking down the stairs and heading into my grandma's room, I'm thinking, one, is she okay? And two, is she still alive? Am I going to walk in here and see her not alive? And there would be many times that I'm walking in and it's dark and the only thing that I could see is like a little bit of her face. And I would look at her, I would walk up close and I would see her, I would check to see if her chest is rising and depressing. Like, is she still breathing? Like, I would look, is she still breathing? Okay, she's still breathing. She's just sleeping. I'm good. I can go upstairs and sleep a couple more hours. Like, just constantly thinking about that is so exhausting, and it was nonstop. And this was not, I really hope that this doesn't come across as me blaming my grandmother for any of this, because this wasn't her doing. If she had it her way, she would have been independent until the end. I've spoken about that so many times. Like, if on paper my grandmother were to answer the question, do you want to be taken care of? She would put N-O in capital letters because she wanted to be independent. She loved her independence. She often felt guilty about needing somebody around 24/7. She was extremely grateful that we were around, like all of that. I'm not trying to blame my grandmother, and I don't want to come across as blaming my grandmother, but these are just the things that I felt during that time. Like, is my grandmother still alive? And maybe you're experiencing that. Maybe you're taking care of your mom or your dad or your grandparents, and you have to constantly think about, am I going to walk into this room and see them alive or not? And that's heavy. It's heavy to think about. And I think that was a big part of why, when my grandmother passed away, there was a sense of relief from me. And I felt guilty about this for a long time. And sometimes I still feel guilty about it. But there was a sense of relief when I found out that my grandmother passed away. When I got the phone call from my dad saying that grandma is no longer here, there was a sense of weight that was lifted off of my shoulders. And I think it's because the constant worry if my grandmother's alive or not throughout the 8 years was anticipatory grief. Me thinking about grieving for my grandmother constantly is the reason I wasn't as sad as I expected to be at her funeral. And I was confused about this for the longest time until I met this caregiver in New York when I went to go do a podcast with Katie Couric. Her name is Adrienne Glussman. She explained to me this concept of anticipatory grief. It's where you're constantly anticipating losing your loved one. When you walk into your patient or your loved one's room and one of the first things that you're thinking about is if they're alive or not. This is you anticipating the grief. And when my grandmother passed away at her funeral, I was so shocked that I wasn't sobbing the way that other people were sobbing. I wasn't emotionally distraught. I wasn't any of the things that somebody normally experiences when a loved one is gone. It's because constantly for 8 years, I'm thinking, is my grandmother still alive? I'm checking to see if she's still alive. And when that time finally comes, it's almost as if I've prepared myself for this situation. Like I knew this was coming. It's different when you're just living your life and you get a phone call and you hear someone say, hey, so-and-so is just passed away. And it's a complete shock because you weren't thinking about this person that passed away's well-being. Maybe you were, maybe you weren't. I don't know. But like if I were to get a phone call right now and I heard that so-and-so has passed away, 100% I will be shocked. I'm going to be sad at the funeral. If they have one, I'm going to be emotionally distraught because I wasn't expecting them to pass away. But because for 8 years, I was constantly thinking about my grandmother and is she alive and all of these things at the funeral, I was so confused why I wasn't sad and I wasn't crying the way that people were crying. And I thought I would be like, I genuinely thought that I wouldn't be able to get out of bed. And I felt guilty about that. And I think it's just because I was just anticipating. I was anticipating her death for a long time. And there's a lot of guilt that comes with that, but I think there's a lot of, I think I'm accepting it more now that it's been some time. It's been about a year and a few months that my grandmother has passed away. And I've just accepted the fact that that is the reason why I wasn't as sad, because I constantly thought about it. And if you are on the other side of your caregiving journey for whoever it is, and you feel guilty about that, or you are confused why you don't have the amount of sadness that you were going to have, maybe that's why. Maybe that's why you don't have that, because you were anticipating it. Now that I'm on the other side, that's the best way for me to say it. Now that I'm on the other side of the journey, I'm slowly starting to realize how much of a blessing all of it was, regardless of anticipatory grief and resentment for other family members and the frustration, all of that aside, there was so much good that happened because I was a caregiver for my grandmother that I really want people to remember that more than all of the other stuff that I just mentioned. Because had I not been my caregiver, had I not been my grandmother's caregiver for that time, I probably wouldn't have sat down and had the kinds of conversations with my grandmother that I had with her. I probably wouldn't have spent all the time that I spent with her. I probably wouldn't have spent all the time with my mom that I did during that time. And I probably wouldn't have wanted to learn Kapampangan the way that I did during that time, because I wasn't outside of being a caregiver. Like there would have been no world where I'm putting myself in a place that is going to have a conversation with grandma, is going to learn Kapampangan and speak Kapampangan, is going to spend all that time with my mom, is going to force me to have these different perspectives on life. Like, and I think I would have been focused on furthering my career or furthering my experiences in the world. I don't think I would have sat down to have conversations with my grandma the way that I did. I don't think I would have just had all that time with her had I not been her caregiver. And that's one of the biggest blessings that came from that journey, is that I just had so much time spent with my grandma. I had so many conversations about things. I was able to learn more about her teaching days and her relationship with my grandfather and how she was raised, how her parents were, how She used to facilitate those voting. Like she used to like make sure that people weren't like cheating during voting. I wasn't able to learn about all of her like pre-teaching days, like when she was learning to be a teacher. Like there were so many things that I learned about my grandmother that I don't think I would have learned if I wasn't her caregiver. And even now that my grandmother's passed, I've seen the shift in my family. Like we don't spend as much time as we used to. We used to have dinner every single night. All of us, including grandma, would have dinner, and we had this routine. And now that grandma's gone, because we're not forced to the same schedule, we don't really spend as much time as we used to together. We don't share as many meals as we used to. Even with extended family, like we don't see them as often as we used to. We used to gather every single weekend, or almost every single weekend, because when my grandma would go to a different family member's house, we would all go to that house and have a little gathering and, chop it up about the week. We don't do that anymore. We only do it on holidays, and sometimes we have to like facilitate just a random Sunday. Like, hey guys, we haven't seen each other in a couple months. Like, let's get together and hang out. So that's why like now that all of that is over, like now that my grandma is no longer here, I can see that she was the glue to everything. She was the glue for a lot of people in my family. She was the reason why we were all like able to spend time with each other. And that's why I really believe that like if I wasn't my grandmother's caregiver, I don't know how much time I would have spent with family. I don't know how much I would have appreciated family. And I think that's something that I'm trying to get, not over, I'm trying to get through that now, and I'm trying to facilitate more moments with family and, just spend more time with family. Yeah, if you're a caregiver right now and you have all these feelings that I have, like I wish I could tell you all of the things, like I wish I could give you the best pieces of advice, but hopefully just by me sharing my experience and me telling you all of the things that I felt during my experience, and you seeing somebody on the other side of their caregiving journey, that in itself is helpful to you. That is my hope for everybody watching this video. I am not an expert by any means. I'm not an expert. I wasn't even the power of attorney for my grandmother. I wasn't making important decisions the way that I know a lot of you are making important decisions for your loved one. I didn't have to figure out all the medical stuff for my grandmother. That was all taken care of by my mom. So I can only tell you the things that I've experienced and pray and hope that they help you in your experience. And if you're on the other side of the caregiving journey the way that I am right now, and you are lost and you're trying to figure it out, I'm right there with you. I'm still trying to figure things out myself. I don't have all the answers to my life. I don't know what it is that I offered to the world outside of like sharing my experience and talking about the things that I went through. Like I'm still trying to answer those questions. Like what am I passionate about? Am I doing things on a daily basis that I'm driven, like that bring me joy, that bring me peace, that bring me fulfillment? Am I? I have to constantly assess those things. And so if you're a caregiver and you're trying to answer all these questions, it's okay. Like, I guess the best piece of advice that I can give you is to give yourself grace and to see me and to know that, hey, maybe I don't have all the answers, but neither does Chris. And we're trying to figure it out, not together, but we're just trying to figure it out. And I think life is just a constant cycle of trying to figure it out. And yeah, I hope this was helpful in some way. I hope this episode either gave you the answers that you were looking for or leads you to the answers. And I appreciate you guys. I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.